configuration depending on which way the board goes. So keep that in mind, that these different recommendations are highly linked to one another. You cannot look at them independently of one another. And that major project will be affected by decisions made on the redistricting. If you look at the map on the left, and I hope you can see it from where you are, Ms. Brewer, do you think you could shut down one of the lights in the back there? Or Bill, do you think the lights over here might help to be able to make this a little more legible? Yeah, we can put the lights back on afterwards. But the map shown on the left is the projection of what the utilization of each school in the county will be if nothing is done. If the students simply stay in the school, come to the school, and the schools grow or decline as projected. The map on the right shows what the utilizations would be, or projected to be, if the redistricting that we just talked about takes place. And you can see that for Broadfoot, it is in the slightly pink range in 2023, which means it'll be overcrowded, modestly overcrowded, if nothing is done. If the redistricting takes place, it falls within the low overcrowding stage, into a reasonable utilization. Crellin, if nothing is done, is approaching 120% utilization, which is virtually unworkable, even for a very, very small school like Crellin. If the redistricting takes place, it's projected that Crellin would fall into about the 102% range. It'll be modestly overcrowded, but that is manageable, especially for a very small school. So you can see it does have an impact, and the map also shows that there would be additional available capacity in the Friendsville school. And you can see that under the redistricting, accident would go to about 99%, so it's approaching overcrowding, and there would be some potential for relief by using the capacity at Friendsville. Swan Meadow, by the way, does not enter into this kind of redistricting because it's under capacity to begin with at 81%, but also because the boundaries are just constructed in such a way that it makes it very difficult to redistrict. I think maybe the lights. Do they have lights back on? Thanks. I hope everybody can see what's on the screen even with the lights on. It's a little bit easier. So if you look at the capital program by itself, it covers the categories which I mentioned earlier: security, disruptive behavior, Head Start, building systems, open space classrooms, the Southern Middle School Broadford project, and then two of the schools that have multiple educational deficiencies, Crellin Elementary School and Swan Meadow. And I'll go through each of these fairly quickly. Security vestibules, the need is to improve control of the school environment. The general idea is that all visitors are identified when they come to the school. The school doors are open during arrival time and dismissal time in the afternoon. Adults are there watching over the children as they come and they go. After that, the doors are locked, and the visitor can be buzzed in at the outside door, just as they are today. They come into a secure vestibule, and in that secure vestibule, they receive a visitor's pass, and if everything checks out all right through the card reader system, they're then admitted into the school, and they go wherever they need to go in the school. So that the administrator's principal knows everybody who's in the school at all times. So it's a higher degree of, in a sense, understanding of how the school is operating. There are basically two types of vestibules, and the selection depends on really the design of the school. When you have the administrative area, which is right adjacent to the vestibule area, then you get the diagram on the left. I hope you can see that. People come into the secure vestibule, then they are admitted into the administration itself. They receive their visitor's pass. They go through the card reader system there. They receive a visitor's pass, and at that point, they can go into the school. When you have an administration area that is not adjacent to the entry area, such as at Broadford Elementary School or Southern Middle School, then the person enters the security vestibule. Someone comes from the administrative area at a teller window, which is very much like what you see in a bank. They do the card reader process, they're issued the visitor's badge, and then they're buzzed into the school itself. This is standard design practice now for major renovations and for new schools. They are being installed in schools around the state, and from everything that I hear, the feedback is extremely successful, very popular with the teachers, the administrators, and with the community itself. Next, we have disruptive behavior. The need here is based on the increasing incidence of disruptive behaviors. The recommendation is providing a dedicated space for de-escalation in every school that needs it. It's a safe, controlled, calming space. The goal is to return the student to the regular classroom as quickly as possible. Project benefits, the ability of staff to focus on the needs of the child that is having a behavioral event, and at the same time to allow the regular program to proceed without being interrupted. The calming space does not involve seclusion or restraint unless there's an emergency situation, so it very carefully follows COMAR in that. And the student is always under adult supervision when they're pulled out of the regular classroom. They're never simply put into a space and left there. They always are with adults to make sure that they're all right and they don't harm themselves, don't harm anybody else. Second, we have Head Start in every elementary school. The need here is to prepare young children for entry into school and also to address their specific needs at an early age when it's most beneficial to address those needs. So the recommendation is provide a classroom in every elementary school. There will be a toilet and good access for parent drop-off and pickup. The location becomes extremely important, so this means working closely with the staff to determine what is the best location. Project benefits for the young child, it eases the transition to elementary school since the child will be in the school where most likely they will be a student within a couple of years. And it allows providers and the teachers to work together to address the child's needs. Better coordination serves the community better by being actually in the community, and also frees up space at the Denton Road facility where Head Start is currently located for other purposes. Then we have building systems, and the need here is pretty obvious. We have older facilities with older building systems. They need to be replaced or upgraded. The Department of Facilities has identified a list of projects, has put costs to them. They are listed here, but not in priority order as shown here. They're in alphabetical order. They're all needed projects. Friendsville Elementary School has already begun that work. It's going to be completed. The others, the Southern High School front building envelope will be requested in this year's capital program. Project benefits are pretty obvious here, I think. Improves the learning environment, makes the building safer and healthier. It avoids shutdowns of systems, which can sometimes mean the shutdown of the building itself. It extends the useful life of the building. At relatively lower costs, you gain additional years out of the building, which means you're deferring the date when it has to be either fully renovated or replaced, which of course costs a great deal more. It reduces the cost of operations through improved energy and water performance. Those have environmental benefits as well. You're reducing consumption, and it improves the efficiency of maintenance operations. Fewer trouble calls from newer systems means that staff can put their attention onto other schools and other building systems. Most of the projects will require professional architectural and engineering services. These are large projects. The fact that these schools are listed does not mean that other schools don't receive attention. They'll continue to receive smaller projects funded through the operating budget, just like the Department of Facilities is carrying out now. So there's continuing effort in that way. Open space classrooms. The open space classroom has found to be detrimental to learning. This was a fad, in a sense, from the 1960s, 1970s. Around the state, in fact around the country, school systems are working hard to enclose those classrooms, and anecdotally they see very positive benefits in terms of student achievement, teacher satisfaction, student behavior improves, teacher retention. I don't think there's yet been a thorough statistical study of those results, but we do hear this all the time from educators. The recommendation is simply to convert the open space classrooms to traditional enclosed classrooms. The benefits, I think, are fairly obvious, particularly in terms of acoustics and distraction. The projects that are being proposed are Grantsville Elementary School, 4 2-classroom pods, And the same thing at Friendsville, 4 2-classroom pods, to be done over a number of years, not to be done all at one time. Because of course, while the work is going on, those classrooms are not available to students, and so you have to find accommodation. You need to roll through a school. And the other schools that have open space, Broadford Elementary, Southern Middle has poorly enclosed open space. Has very bad acoustic properties and very bad instructional qualities. And so those 2 projects fall under the recommendation, which I'll be talking about next. And then for Swan Meadow, we'll be talking about that down the line. So the big project here is the Southern Middle Broadford Elementary School renovation project. And part of what's driving this is that the roof at Broadford simply has to be replaced. It cannot be maintained for many more years. Patching. The cost to replace is estimated at about $2.3 million, based on the assessment that the Department of Facilities has done, and then applying cost escalation to the point where construction would actually begin. There's also a number of interior deficiencies, the open space classrooms being obvious, other building systems, the administration area not being located near the front entrance, and then the fact that it has relocatable classrooms, some of which will not be needed in the future if enrollments are decreased. The approximate cost to renovate, simply at a very basic level, that school, including the roof and relocation of the administration area, would be about $23.4 million projected out. Southern Middle School has similar types of deficiencies, the poorly enclosed open space, the location of the administration area not near the front doorway, inappropriate science and technology spaces. And so a minimal renovation there would be estimated about $20.5 million. So together, to arrive at fairly minimal renovations, you'd be spending almost $44 million projected out. Since the roof is unavoidable, the real question is, does the county want to spend $2.3 million for a school which would still be educationally inadequate? And so a school that, or a project to consolidate the 2 schools would improve the learning environment significantly. It would be based on an educational specification. It would improve the operational efficiency of the schools. And this would be 2 schools under one roof. They would be separate schools. We do have models for that around the state. We know it can be done. It would reduce the total footprint of the school system, which implies greater efficiency, and it's also likely to be much less expensive than the renovations that I just pointed out here. So if you do it from a cost perspective alone, it actually makes sense. The recommendation, the preliminary recommendation of the committee is to consolidate the 2 schools under one roof as 2 separate schools. There are other options, and to really go through this process, you would have to undertake a feasibility study. It would be required by state regulation, but it would be a good thing to do in any case, a wise thing to do, to look at all the possible options that you have. And out of the educational specification, which would be based on the educational out of the feasibility study, rather, based on the educational specification, would come design, and then that would lead to construction. As I mentioned before, the cost of this project, which is very, very large, will depend to a great extent on the number of students that's required to house. So if you have no change in student assignments, the cost estimate is about $41.2 million. If you redistrict, as we discussed earlier today, it comes down to about $37.3 million. And if you redistrict in a different way, where you also reassign middle school students to the 8th grade at Southern High School and reassign 5th graders in the South to Southern Middle School, in other words, grade reconfiguration, the cost comes down to $33.8 million. So the 2 issues have to be discussed together. They are closely linked to one another. And clearly, that is a major commitment that the county would have to make. Crellin Elementary School, very strong community school, has a large number of educational facility deficiencies, which in a large school would be overwhelming. In a small school, very often these things can be handled more easily. For instance, it has a lack of resource space. In a large school, you would be trying to carve this out of storage closets. In a smaller school, you can usually just pull the child aside and have small-scale instruction, one-on-one, small group instruction, find a quiet corner and carry on the instruction in that way. But nevertheless, under an argument that all the schools in the county, because of an equity view, should have offer the same educational program to their children, and that's linked to staffing, it's linked to administration, but it also has a facility dimension. Under that argument, we have to identify deficiencies, and we have to think about which of these would need to be corrected and how to correct them. So the recommendation here falls into three basic categories. First of all, implement targeted renovations, relatively small scale, but over a period of years that address very specific education or building system deficiencies. And examples of that include, say, putting lockers and cabinets in a hallway, new entrance, new exterior doors, that kind of thing. Small scale, very targeted. A second aspect is to replace two older relocatable units, which are not operating very well now, with newer units taken from Broadford Elementary School, but actually move two additional, so a total of 4 units, actually increase capacity. As I mentioned, the school is somewhat over capacity, is projected to be over capacity in 5 years. This would help to relieve that situation or provide programmatic space, which they lack now. And then at the same time, begin the study of additions could be needed for programmatic space and or for capacity. If capacity was provided, that would relieve overcrowding at Crillon. It could also be used to relieve overcrowding at Yacht Glades. So it involves both fairly immediate actions to correct deficiencies and longer-term actions to study the issue of additions, which of course are fairly large capital investments. And then Swan Middle School, also a very strong community school. It has a unique cultural and social role in Garrett County, high level of community involvement. Under the same argument about equity, the students should have the same opportunities as other students. The small size does lead to concerns about sustainability, about the educational program. Can it meet the current and future state requirements? Operationally, is it sustainable to operate a school for between 50 and 60 students? And then under capital, it requires a minimum of $250,000 investment. I think it's actually more than that. And so is it sustainable to invest in such a small school? There are a number of deferred maintenance items, and some of them are listed here. The parking lot, drain which is needed, replacement of boilers, the domestic hot water system, interior doors. There are also some ADA accessibility issues in the school. Has a large number of educational facility deficiencies, including in support facilities such as toilet, storage, parking lot, but resource rooms, doesn't have a dedicated music, art, or gym spaces. The administration area is one large space. It needs some differentiation. So the proposal at this point is to present a full kind of outline of the implications of either committing to keeping the facility in place and addressing the needs of the facility, or to closing it. And that issue is somewhat linked to the Southern Middle School and Broadford Elementary School question. And so we are working on a timeline of when the full information will be given to the board. I think you can well imagine that this doesn't come cheap. We estimate that the total cost is about $54 million, state contribution of about $22 million, and local contribution of about $32 to $33 million, based on some reasonable assumptions about construction cost escalation, about state participation, which can change. It's changed just in the last few years. The rules changed, and that sort of threw a number of us for a loop. Because the number is so large, the committee asked for it to be broken down into tiers based on the sense of priority. That the tier 1 are the highest priority projects, the ones that have a certain level of urgency. They come to about $7.2 million total. Tier 2, the next level of urgency, an additional $9.7 million. And then Tier 3, which includes the Southern Middle School Broadford project, is a very large number, almost $38 million. I think the idea here is that as annual capital improvement programs are put together, they look at this tiering and they try and be sure that all of the high urgency projects are taken care of, either with local money only or with state and local money, to make sure that they're addressed before moving on to the Tier 2 projects. And of course, projects change. Any good capital program has to be examined every year, re-examined, because needs do change. We're proposing to relocate the Board of Education office. At the moment, the candidate to receive it would be the Denver Road facility. This presumes that the Head Start program, which is located there, has moved out so that there is space made available. The advantage here is it does reduce the total square footage that the Board of Education is responsible to maintain. I should add in here, it actually avoids also the capital investment that the board has to make, which is fairly substantial into that building under the lease agreement it has. It would consolidate board functions into a single location, and it would have estimated annual operating savings of about $67,000 per year. There would be some project expense. We've just budgeted a certain amount, $100,000 for renovation work, $5,000 for soft costs to carry out this project. But the longer term advantage is that there will be the continuous avoidance of the operating costs. And then finally, a recommendation to study the issue of a single high school. And the recommendation here is that the board should establish a standing committee to study all issues. This is a very complex question. A subcommittee of the full committee did study the issue. And they read the literature, they looked at it, they assimilated information that came from the previous study. So what they found is that there do appear to be some instructional advantages, greater instructional opportunities to be offered to the children, equalizing educational opportunities, particularly you may be aware that the Northern School does not offer culinary arts and the Southern School does. Providing efficiencies, single instructors could replace 2 instructors, which doesn't mean then you lose instructors, it means the second instructor is now able to teach a different subject. So you're expanding the range of offerings. You have more students to form sports teams, band, theater activities, and so forth. And you eliminate 2 older, underutilized facilities. The information is very inconclusive about the financial benefit or detriment to this. We just don't know at this point. You know, there has been in the previous study some identification of possible savings, textbooks, for instance, CTE material and equipment, and so forth, but then transportation could increase. We don't know until we do a more detailed study, and that's where this committee comes in, to really undertake and to dig deep into these issues. An educational program would need to be developed. The committee would want to look at other school systems that have consolidated high schools, including your neighbor to the east, Allegheny County. Understand community wishes and needs, determine a location and site, or several candidate sites actually. Consider the question of whether career and technology education should be included in the same building or should be in a separate building. There are models for both in the state. Both models work very, very well. And so it's a question of finding what's best for Garrett County. Look at the finance issues, the project costs, the life cycle cost issues, the operating budget implications, and then identify the funding sources. And the suggested schedule is very lengthy, about a decade, actually. Excuse me. Looking at occupancy in the 2029-2030 school year, going through all the steps that are required, and obviously not an inexpensive project. Excuse me again. We estimate approximately $115 million for a student body of about 1,100 projected out. And that's very much in line with the kinds of costs that we're seeing in the state for high schools of that size. Of course, you can do it at less, in various ways, and there are certain assumptions that are built into this at this very early stage to come to that number. Those assumptions would have to be tested, of course, by the committee. And community involvement is absolutely essential from the very beginning here. Establishing the educational program, the location of the building, addressing the transportation implications, which we're very aware of, that this would be major changes in transportation routing for many students. The committee developed funding recommendations. Clearly funding is a critical aspect of this whole thing. Part of that is to adjust the state-local cost share formula to take into account some of the special conditions that you face here in Garrett County, the topography, the size of the county, the climatic conditions that affect transportation. Relocating the Board of Education offices, that freeing up of the annual operating and maintenance cost there can be translated into debt capacity, to not a tremendous amount of debt capacity, but every bit helps. Investigate modest property tax increase. You cannot undertake a capital program of any size through an operating budget. There has to be, and this is a very standard procedure with governments, the issuance of debt, generally based on the operating budget, but sometimes based on avoided costs. And that's where the tiers concept comes in to say what can be achieved within the acceptable property tax limits of the county. Identifying joint board and county functions to streamline operations. Information technologies are already shared. The idea is to look at other areas such as finance and personnel. Those are just suggestions. There may be other areas to see if there are opportunities for streamlining. And then identifying joint users of available school spaces. And this is something that can be undertaken starting right now. To say, are there community partners that can occupy underutilized space that under a memorandum of understanding or some other arrangement can help to defray operating costs, can help to defray capital costs, like the replacement of the roof that covers everybody, and can actually provide good synergies in terms of the interaction between community functions and instructional functions. And there are many examples around the state of how these are working and very, very beneficial to all the parties that are involved. And then the FY 2021 Capital Improvement Program, the recent history, meaning the last decade, Garrett County has not requested funds from the state in every year. There's a determination not to miss this cycle because the need is so great. If you miss a cycle, it's a year until you can come back. The general view is that requests will be viewed very favorably because Garrett County has not requested an awful lot in the last decade, and so there's a backlog, and that's recognized. The requests are due by October 4th, it's right around the corner, and then the statement of county government concurrence is needed by November 27th. And so the capital program is being put together as we speak. The committee developed a resolution essentially to recommend to the board these preliminary recommendations and further recommend that the board charge the superintendent with developing a capital improvement program that would address the categories that are shown here: security, disruptive behavior, Head Start, building systems, open space pod enclosure, and the relocation of the board office. So then it would be the judgment and the authority of the superintendent to put together the capital program to prioritize the projects, to develop very exact cost estimates for the individual projects. And all of that, as it goes into a capital budget request. Challenge is obviously very great. Funding, clearly, one of the largest challenges. Local fiscal capacity is constrained. However, these are needed projects, and delay only increases costs. We use a construction cost escalation figure of 4% per year. It's a very standard industry factor that can vary tremendously from year to year based on market conditions. And market conditions can be very unique to geography. So what applies, let's say, in the Washington-Baltimore area may not apply in Garrett County at all in terms of market conditions. Another challenge is management capacity. Having a number of large, complex projects running concurrently is a true challenge to staff. There are ways to supplement staff, so that can be addressed. Prioritization of the projects and actions. Clearly not everything on this list can be done within the fiscal constraints. That demands prioritization. Prioritization is always controversial because it means that depending on how the funding comes out, some projects may not be done at all. They might have to be deferred a year, 2 years, or they may have to be dropped altogether. And then community support is absolutely critical to carrying through a program of this type. So at this point, we'd like to hear your questions and your concerns. Please use a microphone. You can also fill in a card, and as you leave, please give it to Ms. Brewer there. You can do both. You can speak and fill in a card. We will respond. Okay, it says we won't, but we will. It's a small audience, and so we'll be glad to take questions. And if we don't know the answer, we will get the answer to you. Please, I hope everybody did sign in on the way into the room here. You also can submit additional questions and comments that might occur to you later on to the email address there. And this session is being recorded, and all the questions and comments will be taken into account by the committee as it develops its final recommendation. And also, you can go to, if you won't need to go back to any slide, just say so. I've gone through quite a lot of material, and if it's something that you want to focus on, happy to go back to any particular slide. So, is the microphone closed? Is there anybody who would like to comment, question?
Hello, Dr. Lehman, members of the committee. My name is David Moe. I'm a resident here in Pine and a taxpayer. My concern deals with the physical aspect. I don't believe the total amount is physically supportable by the county. We do not know at this point what the implications or additional mandates we would receive from the Kerwin Commission, and it's doubtful that we will know by the end of the calendar year, as far as I know. What hasn't been considered by the committee, in my opinion, is for the Board of Ed to operate within its current fiscal constraints and making compromises as a result of that. And I would respectfully ask the board or the committee to sit down and make a plan based on that, thereby giving the Board of Ed an alternative. This presentation or operating within the fiscal constraints it currently has. That would be my major recommendation. Because the way I see it, from my perspective as a taxpayer and observer of government, there's no way that this can be accomplished, this plan. There has got to be some consolidations in order for the board to operate and make some of these upgrades. I'm aware of the undercapacity of Southern High School of more than 50%, which reeks for consolidation of some sort to utilize that space in one central facility. The overcrowding at Yacht Glades and Broadford could be eliminated by making some of these consolidations. There's overcapacity at Northern High School also, which could provide some relief to the board by consolidating and moving grades up to that facility. It's one of the newest one, and it's the newest current facility of the existing dozen or 13 facilities we currently have. Number two, this facility, the college, has the newest and greatest and most up-to-date educational facilities in the entire county. I don't know how many seniors are currently taking AP courses here, but perhaps an MOU could be worked out with the college to move seniors up here. Every time I come to the college, it appears completely and totally underutilized. And the utilization, I've never heard of a utilization or capacity utilization figure about the college enrollment. And I would appreciate it if the committee would investigate that. I think that could solve some additional overcrowding problems and eliminate space. I don't believe that building any additional capacities, such as at Crullen Elementary, is going to be favorably received in light of the fact that we have We are forecast to have a declining student population over the next 10 to 20 years of maybe 300 to 600 students. So in my opinion, we need to consolidate and look at our existing facilities for increased utilization. I was available and present at all of your committee meetings, and I thank you for that. Thank you.
Anybody else would like to speak? Please.
Yeah. I usually don't need a microphone, but.
Please say your name.
My name is Joe Pudlack. Let me, I have some questions wrapped around the plan, because I missed the first part of the meeting. We actually had golf practice. I'm one of the golf coaches in the Southern District. But can you pull up the redistricting slide? I have some questions about that before I get into my concerns. I couldn't make out from the presentation, and I did study the presentation before I came in here, so what I couldn't make out by the map is, where is the line? I know where the current boundaries are, but what will be the new boundary line for, let's just use Broadford on there?
We don't know that yet.
That's a point. We're not defining the boundary line. We're not defining specific districts.
Okay.
And, that is work if a board adopts the concept, which is essentially to use the capacity in the north, relieve the overcrowding in the south. Then that's when the
Okay.
work would begin to define specific.
That makes sense. Okay, that's one of the things that was unclear, I think, when I was going through the plan, was where that, because I saw a line on there, and I was trying to, I was pulling up maps and trying to, where we're at. Now, I do have to ask this question, because my understanding is, in looking at this, that the year that you would be looking to redistrict children would be around 2023, correct?
It's for 2023. See, this is the projection of enrollments to 2023 if these actions take place. Now, whether the actions occur at one time, whether there's a grandfathering, whether there's a kind of a roll-in, those are the kinds of issues that the board would have to address.
That's my question, because I have a daughter that would be a junior at that point in time, coming up through Southern, and that's a huge concern with that. So, okay, so the board's taking that into consideration, and I completely appreciate.
The board did raise some of those questions at
Okay.
the board meeting a week ago Tuesday.
Okay, and unfortunately, I travel a lot for work, and I was out of town, so I was unable to make that, so I wanted to come in here. But, okay, so that's going to be, and that's not completely determined at this point in time.
Well, first, the board would have to accept the concept.
Yeah.
And
Understood.
also, this committee still has final recommendations, so there's still possibly, some molding of this whole idea as we move forward. Essentially, what we've done through this is test the idea, test the concept to see. We think it can work. The map that I'm showing up here shows areas that were looked at to say, here's some potential. That's not to say those are the specific areas that eventually would be reassigned.
Now, and what I was able to discern from the maps, the two maps that you had up there, I get impacted, I think, by map number 2, because I live in Swanton. However, we live in the 1,000 acres Sky Valley area of the lake, and I think that's one of the, so that's why my concern. What's that? Yeah, and everybody, the popular opinion in the community is it's an easy fix to move those students north. So, that's one of the things that, I do have my concerns with that. And let me get into one other, and we'll come back to this point. So, I moved here 4 years ago from outside suburb of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My wife wanted to slow down in lifestyle. I travel a lot, and we chose to live here largely based upon schools. My son, who's sitting back here, he's a sophomore right now. He's flourishing in Southern High School. I can't say enough about the quality of the education, the teachers, and all that type of stuff. And honestly, I think that the buildings on the inside, I think the district does a very good job of maintaining what they have. I think they do a very admirable job of what they have. My concern comes with taxation. I am an executive vice president of a large healthcare organization. My taxes increased when I moved to the state of Maryland over 50%. Okay, it is an astronomical number that I pay in taxes a year just because it's moved down here. That is a concern. Now, the irony of the money flow from me to the state of Maryland is my property taxes actually decreased coming here. However, my wage tax went from a flat 3% to, I think my CPA had it figured last year at like 6.4% blend overall with the county down here, which is a large number coming down here. Now, that's something I think we need to be, because where's my money going to? And I understand that, and is it that I don't know necessarily it's a school board here, however, it's our county legislation. They need to go get that money back from the state whenever it goes down there, correct? To come back up here to fund these types of projects.
In terms of school projects,
Yeah.
there are locally funded projects, and then
Okay.
there are projects that are split for
Okay.
the state. And it's a 50-50 split on eligible items, which means that for a major project, it's going to come out as considerably more than 50% for the local, because we have so many ineligible items, including design.
So my question is are our county legislators doing a good enough job getting in the governor's ear to get the money back up here?
One of the recommendations is to
I
look
see
at
some
the,
chuckles.
to look at the state local cost share formula, which is written into regulation. And Garrett County here, at the moment, has a 50-50 split, as I said. That's based largely on the property tax factor, which is one factor among others in the calculation. The calculation is done every 3 years. That's going to be changed, and now it's going to be done every 2 years. So it could change,
Okay.
because these factors do change. But that's what I was saying, and looking at funding, are special conditions that some jurisdictions face being addressed. You have the weather conditions, the topography, the size. This is the second largest jurisdiction in the state of Maryland. So travel distances are very
Understood.
large. Okay.
And I understand our bus. So let me fill you in on one other
Yep.
little anecdotal story here. 2 times since I've moved here, I have tried to create jobs in Garrett County. And not just a small number of jobs. One was almost 200 medical coders and billers, and another one was specialty coding program. I own an analytics company as well that we do hospital research. That was 40 jobs. So the problem with the 200, number one, was office space. There was no office space in the community that was currently built for me to migrate people here. There was unskilled labor within the community. My real estate company came back to me and said we didn't have enough skilled labor to support that type of initiative. And that's a fair assessment, because they're trying to find 200 medical coders in any municipality it's a pretty large claw to go out and put out there. We didn't have easy access in and out of any major transportation hubs. So until we fix the situation up at Garrett County Regional Airport, or get something going with Morgantown where there's an easy in and out, for me to fly people in here that would have been somewhere between probably 5 to 10 people in a given week, was just coming down from Pittsburgh was an economic burden within the company. Then it got into our opioid crisis that we have within the district. Was another problem that we looked at, and it came back with a big naysay. And then it was the infrastructure up in north, because everybody wants to throw us towards Grantsville, and because we build it, they will come. Lack of housing to relocate people here, lack of supermarkets. I mean, everything that you could think of didn't have. So then when it came out for a 40, to take a look at 40, we chose Raleigh for the 200 and Salt Lake City area for the 40. So, I've tried to bring things here. I just can't make it work with what we have here. So
It's a real difficulty, and, obviously the school system is involved in this, but these issues do go beyond the school system.
they go well beyond the school system. Yeah.
But it is this sort of chicken and egg question.
Yeah.
You need to have a workforce in order to attract investors. You need to have jobs in order to develop a workforce.
But I always hear that we're going north, or we want the infrastructure north because that's where everybody's going to go to. I want everybody to understand, I've looked at it twice. I couldn't make the numbers work. So.
Right. There may be other times.
And I'd be happy to talk to any of them. I'm new in the community here, so I don't know many of you, but I'd be happy to talk to any of the board members if they want further opinion with it, so.
Well, thank you for your comments, and I'm very glad you raised the issue about the opioid situation, because
It was a problem.
what we're addressing, hopefully, through some of these, we recognize that when it comes to, say, disruptive behaviors, staffing and sort of administrative aspects are very important, the clinical aspect, but there is a facility dimension to that as well, and that's what we're trying to work, in a coordinated kind of way to develop the resources. Talking to principals, they did say, we need to have a space. where we can actually take children for de-escalation, and that the entire school can be disrupted by an event for a number of hours unless you find a way to handle that situation.
So the moral of my original comment about the taxes, I don't mind paying the taxes if it's coming back up here to help our schools. And I think a lot of people who live in the community here feel the same way. So
Right.
I will tell you, I'm very keen though on this redistricting concept. Because by what I've seen, I think my daughter's gonna get impacted in her high school years, so.
Well, as I said, in the redistricting, there would be substantial community involvement, and those kinds of issues would be raised.
Perfect, thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Thank you. Thanks.
Joe, just so I make sure, very keen, you do support the redistrict or you do
I
not?
do not.
That's what, okay,
Yeah, I do know. If it impacts.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay. We're happy to take questions and put it in a particular slide. Or if not, then thank you all for coming out. And this is an ongoing process. There will be other opportunities for your input. So stay tuned, please.
Are you?
I'm a mom in the school, no,
Okay.
I'm a mom in the school.
Hi there, Pastor David, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I teach at
Jennifer
Yaw
Paul.
Glade.
Okay.
I don't have any kids in school.
You're on the board, aren't you?
No,
Are you on the board? Okay, you're just on the committee.
we're the committee.
You just gotta be
Joe,
on.
2 board
I'm
members.
just
have us. You just have us, Joe.
That's okay,
Yeah, there are 2 board members, 2 names,
One in the black and one in the denim.
and the black and the white, her name is Charlotte Siegel, and the lady in the jeep.
You know, I do want to say the wealth formula that they're basing this by was supposed to be looked at and gone down state and trying to work with the government by the elected board and by the county commissioners 8 years ago. It wasn't, it didn't happen.
The issue.
I've had a conversation with Larry, and he told me that R3.
He's going to tell you what you want to hear.
Yes and no. He's telling me that our county commissioners aren't asking for it.
So here's the issue, I think. I mean,
And he could very well be telling me what I want
This
to
is
hear.
not objective, it's more
Yeah.
an opinion. I'm not going to take it for what isn't or is what. I think the lobbying effort is going to require a real grassroots effort. I think, and that.
You're good. We'll